Hey folks, hey folks, hey folks, hey folks. All right, let me get into some of your questions. I'm going to jump into things today. Really interesting week that we have had here. Let me start with a bunch of questions and try and pull them together. Hey folks, welcome to September. We made it through at least June, July, and August, those months that I told you were going to be hard. And now September is hitting with a crash. I've been writing all day and most of last night, actually, and I finally just had to stop writing the letter, just stop as opposed to rounding it out because so much stuff is happening. I'm just going to have to let it slop over into tomorrow, or nobody could possibly read it all. So anyway, I hope, let me give you a little pep talk here to start. I hope, I don't know about you, I always feel like September is the beginning of the year, not toward the end of it. Because when school starts, it's all kind of new and there are new things that people can do and that you can do in your life. So I hope you carry a little bit of that excitement about the fall as well as I do, because I think we're going to need it. All right. So a couple of you here, aloha, Waltham, Massachusetts, city of clocks. Someday I'll get to tell you the history of clocks in the United States. Maine is here. Maine's here too. Illinois as well. Iowa, man, look what you did last week. Michigan, New Jersey, Sedona, Arizona, Los Angeles, lots of people from all over here. And let me get into the material that you asked me to get into today. But I want to start with something you didn't ask me about. Or at least I couldn't see everything. I actually just went out kayaking and came back. And of course, everything's hit the fan in the last hour. But so I didn't make it through all your comments. Maybe somebody asked about this, but I think it's really important and I don't want it to get lost. And that is, of course, we're just through a holiday weekend. And at about 2:00 in the morning on Sunday, the 31st of August, the Trump administration tried to send out of the country because we haven't seen the numbers, about 47 children between the ages of 10 and 17. They hailed from the country of Guatemala and they had come to this country as unaccompanied minors. And when that happens, a number of protections go into place for those minor children so that they don't get trafficked. And they're supposed to be in a certain agency in the United States. And what happened was the Trump administration tried to take them out of that agency, give them to ICE, and send them back to Guatemala. Now, they're supposed to be in that agency so that their relatives or their guardians can get them and can keep them in the United States while their asylum claims get processed. And the administration tried to argue that the children wanted to go back to Guatemala. And when the judge stepped in and learned more about those kids, they they said, no, we're afraid to go home. So the reason I think that that's important is because the administration, in the middle of a Sunday night, 2:00 in the morning of a holiday weekend, pretty much, according to the judge who got the case, she was not assigned it. It's been assigned to somebody else now, but she initially took care of the emergency injunction that people asked for to stop the sending out of these children. She said this is illegal. There's no legal way for you to have done this transfer from what's called ORR to ICE, and she not only made them stop. They called her at 2:30 in the morning, and she said there would be a hearing that afternoon, and then it turned out that they'd already put these children on planes and were getting ready to send them out. And she then called, said to these people, "You are not moving these children and get them off the freaking planes." I paraphrase. That's not the way she put it, but there's a couple of really interesting points about that. I think, aside from the horror of the fact that our government is taking unaccompanied minors out of government custody where Congress has said they belong, and is just sort of randomly deciding to send them back to the places they fled from. And that is that they did it in the middle of the night on a holiday weekend. And that's why I said I wanted to make sure people knew about it, because I think for a lot of people, so much happened today. This is going to have flown under the radar screen, but it's important because they knew that it was going to be enormously unpopular if they did it, or at least it appears that way, considering they did it in the middle of the night on a holiday, the Sunday of a 3-day weekend, the Labor Day holiday, which is a fairly busy holiday. Lots of people traveling, getting ready for school, and so on. It's a pretty good time to be opaque if you want to be. And also, that when the judge stopped them, she made it clear she did not trust the administration to not to cheat in some way, to go around what she said, because that's what they did when they invoked the 1798 Alien Enemies Act and sent those men from Venezuela out of the country to the terrorist CICOT prison in El Salvador. They said that they had misunderstood the orders, and she was very clear that you're not going to move these children, and I want to make sure they're all accounted for. And as of noon the next day, they appear to have all been accounted for back in the agency where Congress has said they should be. So I thought those two things were really important. But there was also a third thing that jumped out to me about that. And that's that if you remember back in March, when the administration sent those men from Venezuela to the terrorist prison in El Salvador, Trump said at the time that he's not the one who signed the order for that. He said, I don't know anything about it. I didn't sign the order. And that just kind of went like water under the bridge. Like I thought that was eye-popping myself, but a lot of people didn't pick that up, or at least it didn't seem to last in the news. And I thought that was interesting because on Sunday, when they tried to get rid of these children, the one was as young as 10. And there's a total, by the way, of about 600 of these unaccompanied minors who fell under this, what they were trying to do. They were trying to send about 47 of them, as I say, out of the country in this particular batch, but there are a total of about 600. That it happened while, to all appearances, Trump was incapacitated. Because that was the other big story of Labor Day weekend, that Trump was missing from. He had a big event on Tuesday. It took about 3.5 hours for a cabinet meeting where all the cabinet officers were saying how terrific he was. And then he did not have any public appearances on Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, or Monday. He was photographed from a distance walking to a golf course, but the cameras and the press were not allowed to get closer to him at the time. And there was every indication that something was wrong. We don't know what was wrong, but it was just interesting to me that that this happened, that something very similar to the first time around happened again at a time when Trump seemed not to be engaged, which to me points to the idea that somebody else is really desperately trying to do as much as they can while Trump is still in office. And that's the other piece here, is that Trump's health has not been good, mental or apparently physical. I'm not a doctor, so I'm not going to speak to that, but I have watched him very closely now for many, many, many years, and he's lost. Usually we say lost a couple of miles off his fastball. He's lost it all of his knuckleball. I mean, he's not in good shape there. So I thought those two things were very interesting, but there's a couple of things going on right now that I think it's worth holding in our heads. And that is, Trump is getting stopped in many, many different places. And I'll tell you about that. And the momentum of the country appears to be running against him. And at the same time, he and his administration are madly trying to consolidate authoritarian power. And those two things are not incompatible. They're very compatible. That is, Trump has tried to force his will on the country. He is increasingly getting stopped. So he is now just insisting he has powers that our Constitution says he doesn't. And I'm not one for predicting the future, but it does seem to me that we are coming to a clash, and a clash that is not going to be able to be papered over. And if I have time, I'll talk a little bit more about that. So what do I mean by him getting stopped? You probably know that as of last week, a court found that many, not all, but many of his tariffs, the ones that he exercised under the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, or AIPA, I don't know how you pronounce it, are illegal. That the Constitution gives to Congress alone, I cannot emphasize that enough, the power to put tariffs on products coming in from other countries. And the administration took that power under the International Emergency Economic Powers Act of 1977, off the top of my head. I could be wrong on that, saying that he has the power to declare an economic emergency and then do whatever he wants. And that was always been a stretch. And court said, no, you actually can't do that. And that's raising all kinds of real problems for the economy and for Trump and for the future that I'm not going to go into next. I've only got a half an hour. But Trump is now insisting that if he can't put those tariffs in place, that America is going to become a third world country. Mind you, those tariffs were not in place before April 2nd, and really not even they were vague for a while there. So the idea that as of, well, let's just go back to January, the idea that as of December last year, America was a third world country, our economy was booming. The wages were going up, things were great. So he's got this fantasy, and he's trying to sell people on this fantasy that if he doesn't get the power to overrule the Constitution, we're going to be a third world country. And I'm just not entirely sure how well that will sell, how aware people are that the economy is slowing and inflation is rising because of his policies, including the tariff. So you're seeing there both the courts saying, you can't do that, and him saying, I have to, or America's done. And the court gave him time to appeal that. So we'll see where that goes when it goes to the Supreme Court. But that has stopped him. He was also stopped this morning by a judge in California who ruled that his use of the Marines and the Federalized National Guard in and around Los Angeles was illegal. That he violated the Posse Comitatus Act. And weirdly, that there's a different case about the actual deployment, but this is the use of them. And I feel like I should really actually write about the Posse Comitatus Act and what it is, because nobody seems to understand where we got it. It's actually important for where we are today. And I've talked about it so many times on these podcasts or webcasts. I'm not going to do it now. You can find it in the clips that my lovely person cuts. But the judge said, no, you can't federalize the National Guard and send in Marines to do law enforcement, which is what the Posse Comitatus Act said. It said the U.S. Army at the time cannot be used domestically to act as law enforcement. And over the years since the passage of that act in 1878, the other branches of the service, with the exception of those law enforcement officers who fall under the Department of Homeland Security, they don't consider themselves covered by the Posse Comitatus Act. All the other branches of the service do. I think that's really important, by the way. But he's been stopped there as well. So you're seeing increasing threats from Secretary of Homeland Security Kristi Noem to send in ICE, which is in the Department of Homeland Security, to cities like Chicago and Detroit and elsewhere. The Trump administration has now been enjoined, that is, stopped from using the military or federalizing the National Guard. Once again, the judge gave Trump time to challenge that and to take that to a higher court. So he's getting stopped in these places, but there are other ways in which people are pushing back. So the Democratic governors of the different states, and occasionally they work with the Republican, are banding together to take a stand against the Trump administration in a number of different places, either legally or putting political pressure on the administration over things like the cancellation of hundreds of millions of dollars of funding for alternative energy or clean energy projects, some of which, there's one of which off the coast of Rhode Island and Connecticut that is 80% done, and Trump just pulled the plug on it. It would have powered, or it will power if it gets finished, 350,000 homes in those states. And a number of different governors, I forget how many there are now, it's at least 5, are banding together to sue and to insist on getting this money back. Similarly, you see, obviously, Gavin Newsom, who is out there pushing against the Trump administration, but also J.B. Pritzker in Illinois and elsewhere. Those 2 states are ones where Trump has done the most threatening. And that's significant, I suspect, in part because it seems pretty clear as an observer that both Gavin Newsom and J.B. Pritzker are good candidates for the Democrats to run in 2028. I'm not making a prediction there. People come out of nowhere. If you had told me that we would have such a dynamic candidate running for the Senate in Maine 3 weeks ago, I would have been like, show me the money. And there we have this man running. The same can happen, of course, at the national level. It is far too early for anybody to start predicting who is going to be a presidential candidate. But we know Trump worries about these things because we watched him try to convince Ukraine President Volodymyr Zelensky to smear Joe Biden in 2019, in July of 2019, because he suspected Biden would be his biggest competition in 2020. So the fact that he is going after Pritzker and Newsom suggests he sees them as real threats. But they're pushing back, and they're pushing back very, very effectively. Newsom, both by using the power of California's economy and also his use of social media. J.B. Pritzker standing very firm on the law and on the Constitution. And because he is himself a billionaire, making threats about protecting the long-term constitutional prosecutions of people who break the law really has teeth in it. And those sorts of things, watching people band together, I think is really quite strong. But you're also seeing it with the American people. You're seeing pushback all over the place. And I don't just mean the protests, although the protests are very important. Those the protests we see in the streets, on the bridges, on the overpasses, those are really important. That is a great way to get messages out. So those are important, but you're also seeing things like the spontaneous artwork popping up about the sandwich thrower in Washington, D.C., a young man named Sean Dunn who threw a submarine sandwich at an officer from Customs and Border Patrol, and the government tried to get him with felony assault, which carries what they charged him with could have had him behind bars for 8 years. And the other way people are pushing back is a grand jury refused to indict him for that. They refused to go along with that. And they have, at this point, grand juries in the Washington area have refused to indict at least 6 people for pushing back against the takeover of Washington, D.C. So you're seeing the ordinary American people stepping up to defend the rule of law. And you're also seeing people using songs and using artwork and showing up to defend their neighbors and sending out alerts when ICE is in the area and putting up posters explaining to people their rights and going online and explaining how things work. There's increasingly this sort of feel of momentum, I think, on people trying to stop the Trump administration. And as a result of that, I think the administration is pushing as hard as it possibly can to threaten, to insist that they're in charge, to claim that they can do things that the courts are saying that they can't. And that's going to be a really hard sell for these reasons. See why I had a hard time writing tonight's letter? Trump's not in good shape. There doing all this at a time when their figurehead is falling apart, and that's a, a problem for a number of reasons for them. First of all, because they have to be concerned about it, and we as a country should be concerned about it because that person is running a large, powerful country and seems not to be in great shape, and that means that he and we are very vulnerable to other countries deciding that they would like to take some slack up. And you saw that this weekend, for example, with Russian operatives jamming the GPS of a plane carrying European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen. And that's a really big deal. I mean, she's pretty much the leader of Europe, of the EU, and here they were threatening the safety of her plane. The pilots had to land using paper maps. That's the sort of thing that you can see people testing what they can get away with. And of course, that's also a way for Putin to thumb his nose at Trump and be like, yeah, you keep saying you're going to do something to me. Obviously, you're not. And that is an issue. Hang on to that idea. One of the other big things that is a problem for the administration is the Epstein files, which, they're madly trying to chum the waters to make sure those hide. But Congress went back into session today. Remember, it was out of session for August. And immediately, people have introduced a discharge petition to force House Speaker Mike Johnson, a Republican of Louisiana, to release the Epstein files. I don't know how many signatures it has now. It needs to have a certain number of signatures, and I don't know if it's gotten them yet. But tomorrow, I believe it's at least 10 of Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell's victims will speak in front. I believe it's in front of the Capitol building. I could be wrong about that, but their voices are going to be heard. That issue is not going to go away. And the reason that matters for the administration is, aside from anything else, even I was going to say, even if he's not in the files, but we know he is in the files. Aside from anything illegal or anything else, one of the things that nailed together the MAGA coalition in 2024 were the number of people who thought that the Biden administration was hiding the Epstein files and that Trump would release them. And the longer it takes for them to release them and the more they throw crap at the walls pretending they have done something, those people aren't stupid. The more they look at it and say, wait a minute, why aren't you releasing the files? That's why we were on this train. And it's already dramatically splitting the MAGA movement. And, the American people, I believe the number is 80% of Americans think that that the administration is not handling the Epstein files well. So there's the Epstein files hanging out there. There is the economy hanging out there as the tariffs start to bite, inflation starts to rise. And the economy continues to slow down and unemployment ticks up. There is also the crisis in the CDC, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, and for people's health care, because of the budget reconciliation bill that the Republicans are trying to call the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, the OBBBA. If you've seen that acronym, that's what it means. But in that budget reconciliation package, the Republicans thought that their cuts that they had made to Medicaid wouldn't hit until after the midterms. But when they cut the tax credits that people who make between 100 and 400% of the federal poverty level got to buy their health insurance, what that meant was, first of all, that's going to kick a lot of people off their ability to buy health insurance in the markets. But it also means that the healthier people in those markets will decide not to have health care. And when they leave because they're healthier, the ACA markets are going to get more expensive across the board. So you're already seeing people like Arkansas Senator Sarah Huckabee Sanders saying, you can't raise prices, to the health insurers to the amount you want. That's just not right. Well, they're doing it because now they're in trouble to cover the amount that is not being covered by those healthier people who formerly would have been in the markets. So they have that hanging out there, but they also have the crisis of Robert F. Kennedy Jr., the Secretary of Health and Human Services, who has been slashing his way through personnel, through funding, cut funding for cancer research, now is attacking vaccines. And, the reason that he was ever invited into MAGA to begin with was because Trump was nailing together this coalition, and there was the hope that he would bring people into that MAGA coalition, and he did. But now people are having to live with the fact he's part of that coalition, and a lot of people did not expect their health care to disappear and their vaccines to disappear, their ability to get COVID vaccine, for example, or cancer research. People like cancer research. And those of us who are older see just how much the treatment for cancer has changed in our lifetimes and are aghast at the idea that we're cutting that research. So that's also something that is important enough to people that over the weekend, 9 former directors of the CDC from all administrations back to Jimmy Carter, Republicans and Democrats both said, this is not okay. You're destroying public health. So the administration is having to deal with all of these things at the same time. And what they're doing is they're going on offense to try and make people frightened and make people react to what they are doing, rather than people taking the ball and deciding what we want going forward. And the reason I sort of laid all this out the way I did is because I want people to remember that the momentum is really running against this administration right now. You've got more people speaking up. You've got more people taking a stand against it. You've got the courts stepping in. And, one of the things that I haven't written about, but I need to, because it is how in the past the American people have pushed back against a scenario like this without resorting to violence. I'm seeing this a lot, that people think, well, it's over, that there's no way to get our democracy back. I'm seeing that a lot this weekend. But the truth is, we look a lot like we did in the 1890s. And there, things got really edgy in the 1890s. People forget that, but they did. I mean, you had the US government using the military against the people by one of the exceptions in the Posse Comitatus Act. You had people marching on Washington. There were all the sort of elements that you can see developing around us now. But instead of having this huge crisis, despite the fact never mind, I won't talk about it, but because I don't like to talk about it, but there was political violence in the late 19th century, early 20th century. But what you had was the recognition on the part of younger politicians. And by younger, I don't necessarily mean age, although often they were younger. I mean, they're in a new group of politicians. Their recognition that the power of the people had changed really dramatically in the early 1890s, between 1888 and about 1892, 1893. And that switch was powerful enough that the younger politicians who wanted to have political careers signed on to the idea that the country's laws had to be adjusted so that the robber barons didn't get everything. And that change was a generational change, and it was an ideological change, and it's what took us from the robber barons to the progressive era in a matter of years. And that is important, I think, in this moment, because if you're watching, you are seeing this development. You are seeing the popular pressure. You're seeing people stepping up and talking about what they want out of the country. They're talking about fairness. They're talking about leveling the playing field so that the rich people don't get everything. You're seeing new faces. You're seeing in new places. You're seeing new ways to articulate Christianity from people like James Tallarico in Texas, and economic fairness in Maine by the Senate candidate Plattner, who is speaking up now. You're seeing these new people coming up, and you're also seeing the old guard who fed MAGA deciding to retire. So Joni Ernst of Iowa announced today that she is not going to run for reelection. I think they're seeing the writing on the wall. And our role in that is to continue to articulate American values based in our history and in our traditions, that can carry us forward to recreate a better system that is fairer and that does what the Declaration of Independence promised us as our birthright. That is to be created equal. We agree we're created equal. We have a right to be treated equally before the laws. We have a right to have a say in our government, and we have a right to have equal access to resources. When I say that we want to protect our traditions, those are our traditions. Those are the traditions that Franklin Delano Roosevelt embraced, a Democrat, and Republican Dwight Eisenhower embraced, and Republican Theodore Roosevelt embraced, and Republican Abraham Lincoln embraced, and all these people in between them. Those are the presidents I just went through, but this is exactly what somebody like Fannie Lou Hamer, a former sharecropper, was talking about when she insisted that Black women and Black men had the right to vote, because the Declaration of Independence says we have a right to a say in our government. That's not the law on which she stood, but that's the principle on which she stood. And you can go through our history and recognize that at our best moments, that's what we are standing on. And we need to stand on that and keep that pressure up, because you're already seeing it change the political equation. The courts, some of them are upholding the law and some of them seem to be sliding toward authoritarianism. I'm very concerned about the Supreme Court, which appears to be just about politics now. But there too, a change in the political temper of the country will change the ways that the courts rule, because they can see the writing on the wall as well. So we're going into an incredibly turbulent time. I really don't know 1 hour to the next what's going to happen. And every morning when I wake up my phone, when I wake up and look at my phone, I just think, what's it going to be this time? But in that turmoil, I do think we are starting to see patterns. And one of the patterns is that the administration is getting bogged down. It's tripping. It's slowing. It's unable to do what it wants to do. And the American people and the courts are stopping that administration from destroying our Constitution and our laws. But that also means the administration is trying harder and harder to put in place authoritarianism while Trump is still there to provide cover for them. Because if and when something happens to him, it may not, but if he becomes incapacitated and is unable to exercise the duties of the president and J.D. Vance steps in, it's not at all clear that J.D. Vance is going to be able to command the loyalty of MAGA, especially with the people hiving off because of the Epstein files and because of the economy and because of cuts to public health and so on. And if that happens, the people in the administration who have been breaking the law can see that they're in trouble. So we're going into a really turbulent time, but it does not feel to me hopeless at all. It does feel to me like I started out by saying, September's a new day, and we'll see what it brings. All right, I hope that was helpful. And I'm going to go back to work, and I will see you. I think I'm doing a couple of media things tomorrow. I'm not sure. One is protected, which is a surprise to me. I don't usually like to do protected stuff. But otherwise, I will see you on Thursday. And once again, a reminder that if you want to get the letters I write every night, they're on Facebook. They are linked here on YouTube. Or you can read them on Substack. There's no paywall, or you can subscribe to them to have them sent to you. Do not put in your credit card. They are free. So there's other ways to get a longer rundown of some of this stuff or something visual you can look at. Otherwise, I will see you on Thursday. Thank you for being here.